The 30Ks never happen.
No.
No. So
No,
Views and
almost every
opinions
day.
expressed by Benoit Bossiger don't represent Cloud Imperium Games, Robert Space Industries, or its subsidiaries.
right. So
All right, guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Little Czech, or Call Me Czech, whatever you like. Today we have to talk about a very important Star Citizen topic. Persistent entity streaming. You can see it already on my screen. I really want to go in depth into this video, get the best scenes out, and I will cut that video down. And hopefully after that, we will have an understanding of what it is and how it will change Star Citizen. And is it really like this, like all these YouTubers, these big guys, tell everyone that you can basically drop a coffee cup somewhere on a moon, planet, whatever. You come back to the game later and it's still there. Is it really like this? We're gonna see. So how we do this? We go through this video, and I know everybody is crazy about persistent entity streaming. So this video, I think, is the most important video out there right now when it comes to 3.18 and of course down the road to 4.0 and the final release. Yes, I think the game is coming out one day. Will I be alive? I don't know. I hope so. But okay, let's just go through this video and let's analyze it and see what we can find out.
Let's talk about persistent entity streaming. Before we get into the questions, let's set the table. What is persistent entity streaming? Now, I know we just did the ISC segment 2-3 weeks ago.
Listen to this now. What is it?
And whatnot, but everybody watches different things and whatever. Now we got Paul. We got Paul's answer to the question. So actually, we had Benoit answer it last time. So Paul, I'm going to point this one to you. What is persistent entity streaming?
Well, persistent entity streaming is basically taking the entire scene graph of the engine, which is the entire hierarchy of the universe, players, all objects, and take that, which was previously stored on, and at most game engines, it's stored in the memory of the server or on the client. We take all of that and we push it to a database, and it gives us the foundation to basically stream the entire entity hierarchy to client servers and to persist. So that means we can shut down all the processes and we can continue where we left off. So it's basically taking this entire chunk of state of the universe and pushing it to a persistent database.
You used a word I was really happy you used: foundation. The way I see persistent entity streaming, it's a new foundation for everything that comes from Star Citizen.
So basically, and we will hear that later again, everything they developed for 5 years is gonna change because of this persistent entity streaming change. A total overhaul of the engine, I guess. Maybe I shouldn't say engine, but as Jared said, the foundation of the game. Everything what is in the game will be basically pushed out to a server and saved and used again constantly. And they can use it in different ways, but listen to that.
And making sure the doors still work.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a very good analogy, because if you look at it, the entity system and the scene graph, that's the foundation of the engine, right? So everything uses it. It touches everything. Every single game team, everything a game feature is touched by this change. So it is very good.
Every single feature of the game will be touched by this new feature. Wow. Okay, that sounds scary.
Like right now, I know one of the questions, if you want to jump a little bit into those, is when we talk about PES, we talk about the server and we talk about the player shard. I think that was one question, and people asking, okay, what's the difference between a server and a shard?
Very important. Two different things. A server, that's basically where you're on when you play. in USA, in Europe, I don't know. You are on a server. That's a different thing than a shard.
And for now, for this very first version, there's not a difference between both because we still run one server per shard. We separate those two words because eventually shard will be much larger than just one server. Once we get to server meshing, which will be in later iterations, that's when we have multiple servers per shard. But in this very first iteration, as you said, we basically we took the foundation of the engine and we replaced it with this new persistent entity database. We try to get at par with what's there, right? So that means we basically take all the tech we already have, one server per shard, and we replace that with persistent entity stream.
But what it sounds to me right now is they don't change anything in the game. They just replace the system, how everything is stored on servers, on those charts in the background. So there is no real change for now, in my opinion.
Hungola in the chat says, drink every time someone says eventually. Don't do that. That's
if it's coffee,
dangerous.
you're good.
That's dangerous.
It is coffee.
Exactly. It depends what you drink, right? Stay hydrated. If you drink water, then...
Yeah. Now, as just to add to what Paul was saying about the 3.18 version of PES, being on a single server and persisting the state of this, right? I think the most major effect that we'll see from that is over time on a given server, because items will persist now, right? Typically right now when a server restarts, the state of the world is sort of lost, other than your ships and your character, which actually live outside of that in the current version.
So your ship and your character, that's the only thing right now saved at the end of your gaming session. If you don't crash the game, if the game doesn't crash, like a 30K, or your computer shuts down, or whatever. It can be a power outage. I don't know. So the ship and your character, it's the only thing saved right now.
When a server restarts, everything else is gone. NPCs reset to their initial spawn positions, doors reset, the entire thing starts back up to the designed initial state of the game world. So that's true after a server crash. It's true on a brand new server that we're adding. And so this sort of auto cleanup, servers also restart over time. Like, some of them sometimes don't have players left on them, and then we restart them to recycle their memory, things like this. Currently,
so servers are going to be shut down. They're going to be sometimes in a reset state because they have to. That's just the technology. It requires to be cleaned up, the cage, a reset. It's like when you have to shut down your computer every night or once a week or whatever.
the state of these servers are lost, right? So what that means is the effect in 3.18 will be that over time, you'll start seeing things that persist across restarts, right? And then so an old server will have a lot of modifications, right? Because all of that stuff doesn't get necessarily cleaned up by a restart.
Yeah, I would add though with persistent streaming and our new shard database, but also the global database, there's the added benefit that every items you take from your shard and put in your inventories, they persist in the exact state you take them out of the shard. So previously your persistent database was just an external database. It was very limited, just a list of items basically. With persistent streaming, when you have a ship and you load stuff into that ship, and you put that ship into your inventory because you landed on a landing zone and it gets stowed into your landing zone inventory. If you play on the next day and you take that ship out of that inventory, it actually comes in the full persistent state as we stowed it from the shard. So
Wait a second. But we have that already. It's exactly what I said. There's no change. I don't understand. What he's saying is what we have right now. if I, buy titanium, I come back to a landing zone, I store my ship in the right way, go down the elevator, go to the terminal, stow away my ship. Next day I come online, my ship is in the same state. I have the weapons on my ship I have the load, like the cargo is still on the ship, the titanium, for example. So I don't understand. There is no difference between what he's explaining to come to 3.18 in persistent entity streaming and to what he just said was in the past. We had this. We have this today.
There will be things which you will notice which obviously weren't possible without persistent entity streaming.
He did not say what it will be. You will see things.
But again, to stress on Jared's point, like right now we did all this foundational work, and now game code teams need to adjust to those changes, and there's a lot of cool stuff they can do now. But we just integrated our big chunk of work into our main branch.
We just did.
A couple months ago.
He doesn't say when. So it's like you work for a company, you did the same thing for 5 years. And then your new boss comes in and says, tomorrow, we're going to work without forklifts. You have to carry everything with hand. Good luck. Oh boy. Was maybe a strange comparison, but that's crazy. So they changed everything in the background. The whole development for 5 years is gone. And now every developer in the company, since a couple months, we don't know for how long, now they have to change everything.
And now game code teams just start to adding those features, so you can't expect
just now they start. Guys,
just because we have the core foundational tech ready and pushed to our main branch, that all the game code teams actually take full advantage of all the new cool features they can do with it. And we will go over those points while we go over the questions, I would say.
So let's jump into it. We basically just backdoored into our first question, which is, what is the difference between a server and a shard? Eventually, it'll be very different, but for the time being, it is kind of a 1-1 thing.
What is the difference?
For 3.18.
Again, you have one server and a shard per server.
And then until server meshing comes in. But before server meshing, which is ultimately where this new foundation is taking us, the question is, since PES is per server, then how do we get back onto the same server that our items are on?
Well, the very, very first. So the first part of the question is, before server meshing, is PES per server, and as I kind of touched on the previous answer. Yes, persistent anti-streaming is per server, but as you can take items out of the server database into your global database, and we made sure it's the same exact database, the same data structures, there will be more persistence. So you can take persistence from one server to another server by putting items into your inventory and then taking them out of the inventory into a new server. Your second question is, how do we get back onto the same server? For 3.18, we won't address any matchmaking changes. And that again comes back to we want to get at par with what we have so far before we start to adding the new features. Also, matchmaking changes will become a part of our server meshing work, which we will start obviously right after persistent entity streaming hits. So for the very first version of persistent entity streaming, you will just use the same matchmaking logic you have right now. That means if you start up your client, you get randomly matched to a server or a shard. I can use those terms interchangeable at the moment because they are pretty much the same thing. Obviously, it's the same as right now. You can play with your friends, so you would join the same instance. If you crash out of a game, we reserve the slot of your current shard. So that means if you crash out, you will be able to have, I think it's 10 minutes to log back in and get connected to that shard so you can recover anything.
Interesting.
And as I said earlier, all items which you take into your inventory. That's what you will keep with you, which you can bring to any shard. So that is your way to basically make sure the stuff you want to really like keep, you can keep by just putting it into your inventories.
Big.
Again, nothing special. I can do the same right now. I can put my stuff, in my backpack or in my ship. I store the ship. It will be still there. But he's saying after a server crash or a crash in general, you have 10 minutes to log in and basically clean up yourself and make sure everything is in the shard or the server, the memory, whatever, how you want to call it. But how you do that?
Differences between what's stowed and what's unstowed. Basically.
Yes.
So let's talk some. We have a.
So what is not stowed? Coffee cup or mug or a beer can, a gun somewhere hidden on a planet. It's not gonna be there. Only the stuff stored away. We have this today.
A few more questions that are in that vein.
Sorry, what we don't have today is if you log back in, there's a high risk that you are waking up somewhere in the hospital and all your stuff is gone. You died or a crash, 30K. But he's saying with the new version in 3.18, you have a chance in 10 minutes or so to make sure your stuff is safe.
The stowing things versus unstowing. Does PES allow entities to persist across all servers? Or does it only persist on the server that the item was originally spawned on? So
yes.
This is almost certainly, you already answered the question, you store it, you take it with you. This is about, if I dump a can, what happens to that can? Does it get replicated everywhere else? How does this work?
So if you, depending on the type of item, and of course, if there's legal ownership attached to it, right, you can stow it and keep it and bring it with you across shards, right? So that's the first thing. But for items even that you legally own, that you leave, let's say I have a gun that I legally own and I drop it somewhere in Port Olisar, and then I stop playing, and then I come back later and I get match made into another shard. That gun is still in the other shard. It persists per shard. So everything that's in the game world, so unstowed items persist in each server that they're on.
So, very clear. Same again, like what we have today. You will not come back to the same shard or server and your thing is gone. It's still there in the server you have been. Someone else can play with it, can use it, but you don't have a chance to get it.
Right. That's why there's a mechanism like insurance to get stuff back. If something happens, that's why there's a mechanism like stowing, so you can take them across servers. Obviously, that's a bit of a downer in because we have a lot of shards, right, for the moment. But the intent and the goal from this foundational work is that we're going to get to very large shards. And so, and with the matchmaking changes that Paul hinted on related to matchmaking, then we'll be able to have shard affinity. And so the gun that you left on shard X, your chance of getting back on shard X will be extremely high. But for the moment, it's not the case. So
the chance, he's saying, that your gun will be in the same spot when you come back after logging in and the matchmaking is done is very high. It doesn't say 100%. Only the chance is very high. So it could be you come back to the server or the shard, which is then bigger in the future. It's one server, but it will take information from that shard, which is way bigger. The chance that you still find your gun there where you lost it or put it, it's high. It's not small, but it's high. But it's not a 100% thing.
But for the moment, it's not the case. So everything that's unstowed in the game world lives in that server. until it's reaped, or until it's destroyed, or until it's cleaned up, or what. There's many. We're going to talk about a lot of reasons why stuff would go away from a shard. But yeah.
So yeah, so if will that coffee cup or gun still be there for others to find when the player placing it isn't online? So that thing that you don't own, when I log off, does it disappear with me, or does it persist there, and for how long? Stock cleanup.
Well, as we hinted earlier, if you take a coffee cup and you unstow it or you drop it on the floor in a shard, it stays on that shard. And it stays there as long as we will talk about the cleanup process a bit later, but it will stay there basically forever, and everyone can go there and pick it up. And if it doesn't matter if the player is logged in or out who dropped it, like the moment.
But isn't that crazy? So now he's saying, yes, after that change, whatever I drop on the floor will stay there. Oh my God, that's a mess. But if I come back to the game, I will not see it. I'll see the mess from other people on other shards or servers until the cleanup process, which they will explain later. I mean, they have to shut down servers and shards and whatnot, and so things are getting cleaned up automatically after a while. So it's not forever. Oh my gosh. But yeah. Okay.
You bring something into shard, it's part of the shard, and will stay there with the persistent shard forever.
Yeah, that was one confusion I saw throughout the questions was it's important to notice that it's not like you log into the game world and all of the items you've placed in the world are now suddenly overlaid in it. No, when you put something in one world, one shard, one server, it's in that server, and so whether you're online or not at that moment, right? So yeah, that's the there's no, if I log off, is my coffee cup I placed on Clio still there? Yes, doesn't matter if you're online or not for that specific for items placed in the game world.
I think the only expectation, the only exception to that is that when you log out, obviously your player gets stowed back into your player inventory, and if you do a ship bat logout, your ship gets stowed together with you into your ship into your player inventory.
So you can fly. Okay. He didn't really add to the answer, but he's saying you can log out with your ship and everything is stored away. Why would it be stored away? If I'm in space and I log out from my ship bed, I want to come back there. But I guess what he meant is it's gonna be really saved in the shard, and that is the only process I can basically do to come back and be for 100% sure that I will wake up in my bed. I get that. That would be awesome.
And that includes items that are in the ship as well.
It's always, yes. If we talk about stowing and unstowing, it's always the entire...
we have this today.
The entire current state of that object, including everything which is...
The only thing we don't have is the guarantee that we'll have the same state of ship when I log out in my bed. I woke up one time in my ship, but I was floating in space and the ship exploded. So I think that change will maybe help to avoid those bugs.
You know, I talked about the scene graph and the hierarchy earlier. If you look at a ship and all items placed inside the ship, you can imagine that as like a tree, a hierarchical tree of items. And if we take the top, the root of the tree, and we put it into an inventory, everything which is under it follows it.
And then drawing that line forward to server meshing. Server meshing isn't about replication either. Server meshing is about bringing all of these things to all of these servers.
Did you see his face? Paul's face? He doesn't want to talk about server meshing, Jared. He doesn't want. It is too early. I think it's something we might never see it.
Servers together in a mesh, and it
I mean,
moves.
well,
it transitions. Doesn't replicate.
I mean, if we talk about replication, I mean, obviously, if I talk about replication, I probably have a different thing in my head, because in server meshing, we do replicate objects between different servers,
Right.
because multiple servers will eventually simulate the same shard.
Right.
And obviously, in that case, you might have two servers and they replicate the same object between each other.
It sounds very complicated. This is new technology. I think they developed something which never existed before. That's territory they go to. A risky territory. And I think because of Chris Roberts, of course, they have to talk about it because he promised it. Maybe he shouldn't have promised that so open, because it's hard work, in my opinion, for all these developers. But okay.
For simulation reasons, right? So it could be that server A simulates one area and server B simulates another area. There's overlap. In that overlap, you have objects in that overlap area replicated to both servers, right? That's why for me replication is a bit different word, but you can see a shard again as its unique individual instance. There's no cross shard replication planned. We do, once we talk about player bases and so on, we do have discussions with design
Player
right now
bases.
how we can do that. For like if a player builds a base on a planet, for example, we kind of want to show that on all shards. Not just on the one shard the player's in, but those discussions are still happening.
Okay. Do we know any game, and guys, leave your comments below. Do we know any game where you build a base and someone else can visit the base in multiplayer, in online? I would like to know, guys. Maybe No Man's Sky. I started to play No Man's Sky. I'm not I'm not at the point to have a home base, and but anyway, let me know, because that might be all totally new.
I'm going to skip ahead on our list here because the next couple questions are all kind of hit the same point. But so let's talk about a very typical scenario that happens. We're a game that's still in development. You land on a ship on a planet, and the server crashes at 30K.
Yes.
If you load back into a new server, how does the player find their ship? I find their old ship at this point, since it wasn't stowed properly, it was landed out.
Interesting question.
I don't know, Benoit, if you want to take that.
Yeah,
He
sure.
doesn't wanna-
So first of all, the 30Ks never happen.
No.
No. So
No,
Views
almost every day.
expressed by Benoit Beauséjour don't represent Cloud Imperium Games, Robert Space Industries, or its subsidiaries.
Right. So in the case of, so you have let's start from the beginning. You go to the ASOP terminal and you unstow a ship. So the ship is first in your location inventory. It's in the global DB. You request the ship. Shows up on a landing pad. That actually behind the scenes unstows the ship, so it moves from the global database to the shard. Now you can now it's being actively simulated by a game server, and so there's thousands of updates on it, right? To keep it up to date in the DB. You go in it, you start flying it out, you put cargo in it, you drop some items in it, whatever. Then 30K happens, right? Server ran out of memory, or something like this happened.
The server ran out of memory was the first fact he used to explain a 30K. So the server memory. I guess he's right. The server memory. Can we not just work on it and make it better, the server memory? Maybe? CIG? Spend some of the money to have better servers?
Now, when you come back to the game, that ship is still in that shard. All right, it's still in the persistent database of shard 24, for example. And so, if you come back and you're match made, most likely going to be match made on another server because shard 24 is not available at the time, especially if you log in rapidly back in. When you enter your new shard, that ship will not be available for sure, right? So, but it will be available for insurance claims. What we are looking at this moment for this problem, because we know that's a problem, obviously, this is not cool, right? Is cool. That when a server crashes, well, we have a dedicated recovery mechanism that we're actually putting in place right this moment. We're working actively on this right now throughout our current stability testing, which will auto stow back the ship into your location inventory. And so what that means is we don't want you to be stuck.
So we don't improve the servers, the server memory, but we work on something to make it a better experience when the server is crashing. Your ship is automatically stowed away.
That's the goal that we have for 3.18, is to make sure that that case doesn't happen, so that in the case of a 30K, your ship is just stowed back in the exact state it was in at the moment of the crash. And so you keep your stuff, right? That's
exactly. I do want to add, though, that eventually, and that's a great feature of persistent entity streaming, if that server 30Ks with persistent entity stream, before persistent entity streaming, that means that this whole world would be dead because the memory is gone, everything is gone. With persistent entity streaming, however, the shard and the state of the shard still exists, right? The server crashed because it ran out of memory, or there was a game code bug, or whatever. It's always game code bugs, by the way.
Yes, always.
It's never the core tech. Yep. Anyways, when that happens, we can actually start up a new server, and it can load back that shard and then continue simulation for exactly where we left off. Again,
that is cool. So basically, even doing a 30K, the shard will be saved. That's awesome. And it can be reused and loaded.
And for 3.18, because we don't want to address matchmaking just yet, we will do what Benoit just said, where we try to locate all the ships and we stow them into your location inventory so you don't lose your ship and the progress on that ship. However, the ultimate goal is that when a shard server crashes, that we restart a new server for that shard, and that matchmaking will allow your player to reconnect to that shard, and then matchmaking will be able to reserve the slot for that exact shard. So you start ultimately, or not in a next iteration, you will be able to start your client, and there will be a little dialogue which telling you, do you want to wait for your old shard to come back online, because obviously it takes a couple of minutes before a shard is back online, and then you will be able to join back to exactly where we left off.
Wow. So there will be a little screen asking you, wow.
And then eventually the final goal, once we have complete the server meshing and the replication layer and the gateway layers all separated, at that point when a server 30Ks, you won't even notice. You will still stay connected, and we start a new server, or we have a fleet of servers already running which can take over that work, right? But that's obviously far in the future. So what we're saying is, in this very first version, to be on par with what we have right now, server crashes, we take player and we take the ships, we put them all into your inventory so you don't lose progression, and you will get the persistent state back from the ship at the moment the server crashed, so you don't lose anything. In the next version, we then try to revive that shard and let matchmaking allow you to come back to that shard.
They will only try to revive that shard. Now that sounds totally different. Before he said it will be there. Now he's saying we will try. CIG, you guys kill me. It's always just try. It's never 100%. But at least you try. I mean, that's good.
And then ultimately in the final version, it should be all almost transparent to the player.
So what you're saying is 3 versions and then we're done.
3 versions.
It's always just 3 versions, right?
Yeah, we're always 3 versions away.
Well, there's always the resource constraint, right? So the same team who would probably work on matchmaking is currently working on the entity graph. And it's also about risk. If we go and
if I watch all these videos every week, Guys, I'm going crazy. Everybody's saying, oh, they have 750 employees. I don't believe this. I don't believe this company has 750 employees. I saw this video from Turbulent this week with Damien, great guy by the way, who said very open, there's no vision and he wants to change it, but he's kind of, you know, hands are tied. He doesn't have the team he needs. What are these 750? I don't believe it. Show me the payroll. There are no 750 people, you know, and only 15 people. I heard this from Montoya, my best friend. He said one time they have 15 people for ship development, but they have 750 employees. What these people are doing? I was plant manager one time. I had 450 employees, and I knew what they were doing, and we had to bring results. Damien said he can do whatever he wants. Is that the philosophy of a big company who made over time, you know, enough money to develop this game? I don't know how much is left. They use it. Of course, everybody has expenses every month. So, and all these people need to be paid. But I don't think it's 750 employees.
Quite frank, 3.18 is a giant risk already because so much new technology, right? We're replacing a database which we have built over the last 5 years.
Again,
and it
5 years.
Came to its limits in the last couple of patches, as we all, I think, experienced. But that is like 5 years of development, which we're now replacing with complete brand new tech.
So he's saying everything they developed came already to his limits. Remember that.
We have, I think it's at that point, probably 8 different like kinds of new services which we're deploying. We also at the same time switched our underlying back-end communication tech to a new framework, which we already battle testing in live right now, but like a lot of new services using that new tech. So there's a lot of like moving parts coming together.
What he's saying is that they deploy things in the background and then you are surprised why your microphone suddenly works in the chat, for example, communication framework. And I recognize some improvements there without anyone telling me that they implemented it. Shouldn't they tell us when they implement certain things in a, you know, change log? Maybe it's being said, but I watch these videos every week from all these YouTubers and Star Citizen. I never heard about a change in the communication framework.
For 3.18, we will keep our current logout system. So when you log out and you log back in, you log back at your last landing zone location. However,
so no changes to the log in and log out system, but obviously they are working on a solution to make it better and different.
PES does enable all of that cool stuff. So with PES, it would be very trivial for game code to change their systems to allow you to log exactly back where you left off, right?
I think there's also an interesting element of surprise, I think, that we're expecting already, just being in the main line for a little bit, where
surprises.
The entity system has this concept of serialized variable. I'm sure we've talked about this in the past, right? Which are basically variables that are replicated. When we say replicated, it's between the server and the client. Now, these things did not persist before, right? So everything that needed to be persisted needed to be handled as a persistent item, whatever. PES makes all of those serialized variables persistent. And so that means that any game component that was made using serialized variables suddenly has persistence. So I'm expecting some surprises, right? So things that, oh shit, now this persists. Wow, this is cool. For example, wear and tear on your armor or things like that, like,
cool.
are
Good
now
example.
going to just stick, right? Because before they were lost every respawn, now these things can actually persist for real.
That's pretty cool.
It's easy to assume that we do these shows just for the backers, that when we produce an ISC or an SCL, it's just for the people who support the game. But one of the weird kind of hidden truths that have emerged over the years is that it's also a great way to inform your work base. A lot of the people who work for CIG learn about what other teams are doing and how they're progressing and get ideas for, oh, they got that, I can do it over here.
That is bad. That is really bad. Does he say now that this show is informing now all the other departments, the other 748 people? Sorry, I had to make this joke. That this is coming now, and how does it work? I mean, they knew it's coming. Okay.
I had somebody message me and say the camper chair that they saw Lewis making in one episode is the exact thing they need for this other thing they were considering. They didn't know it existed until they saw it on SCL. What are the plans for culling in PES? Will it involve staying when in proximity to players? What can you tell us about culling plans?
Okay, that's a good question. With our old system, we had this, it's called lifetime management, and it would arbitrarily remove entities once they hit a certain cap. And we realized that's not really great for play experience. For example, I think at the moment players can only spawn up to 3 ships. If they spawn another ship, the old one gets removed. For persistent entity streaming, we actually revisit that problem, and we decided, okay, how can we make this nicer for the player, but also B, how can we make this actually work good for persistent entity streaming and also for server meshing, where maybe it doesn't make sense if a player has 5 ships spawned and they're all separated in open space and streamed out, they don't really cost us performance. So why do we still need to arbitrarily limit that? And for that, we have the guys in Frankfurt developed a new system. It's called density management. And it operates on relative cost of an area. So the idea is that instead of just taking arbitrary numbers on objects, we look at areas and we look at the amount of items in that area. And we only start to remove items the moment the relative cost of that area becomes too high.
So basically, and I did not know that, I never spawned more than 2 ships. But so he's saying the game is already able to handle more things in the verse, but they have a system in place to remove things if they're too dense, if it's too dense in that area. But they could actually expand that. That's so interesting.
So as long as you spawn your ships in different locations and they're all spread out, we will never touch them or remove them. However, if like now everyone goes to the same spot and you start spawning ships and spawning ships at the same location, that's when the system will find out, okay, now the performance goes down because our relative cost in that specific area goes too high, and then we will start deleting items, which also follows a certain rule set. So we will delete oldest items first. We will also have a relative priority on items. So a player ship, for example, is a very high priority item, right? So we would not delete a player ship versus a coffee cup, for example, would be the first item to go away.
So we had ship meetings on Daima many times. It was very drastic when everybody knew they're gonna wipe the servers and money's gonna be gone. So we had all the ship meetings every week, and there were sometimes 20, 30 ships, and I don't think anything got removed. Crazy.
And then with that, we try to get the game to like where it's very, it's not very invasive to you, so you don't just see stuff disappear out of thin air. Exactly, like the approach we're taking is that most of this cleanup will happen during stream out. So if an area streams out, that's when the density management will make a first initial pass and will say, hey, in this area we had 50 coffee cups, and that's too much, so we start removing them, and then we only go into the more aggressive policies once it's really becoming maybe an area never streams out or whatever all players decided.
Because this also covers NPC entities, right? So like AIs and whatever else. And so if a specific entity is actually being referenced by a mission, active mission or active player, for example, then there's a ref canting reference counting system that will prevent those from being actively reaped, so that again, I think the goal with density management is really to make sure stuff doesn't pop out of your view, and break your game experience. So, but we still need a density management system to prevent overloads. But that's the approach in general.
Will PES allow for ship states, MFDs, gimbal modes, scanning angles, all these things to persist within player ships?
Oh, interesting.
So I did actually inquire about this a little bit before we came here, because obviously this is game code driven, so it's not something that the PES team actually controls, though we do enable persistence for those things. So I do believe that gimbals modes might persist because they're implemented with a serialized variable. So that means that this would stay. For MFDs and scanning angles, we don't know yet. That needs to be confirmed by the combat team. But if it's implemented with serialized variable, then yes. If it's not, and it's a reset, like again, a bit like the spawning location, right? If every time you sit in the seat, it changes a value, then it doesn't matter if it's persisting, right? So, but that's something that all the game teams will be tweaking up until we get there. And if they can benefit from it, I'm sure they will jump on it. Absolutely.
Yeah. With the light at the end of this tunnel, not exactly close, but closer now than it's ever been. How are you guys feeling?
You go for it, Paul. I did this last week. No.
me personally, I'm super excited. Like as you said, we worked on this like almost 2 years on the new database, on the new tech, and we worked obviously with our strike team pretty hard, but in isolation in our own stream to develop all the tech, develop new services, all the stuff. And now that we finally in game dev, it's really exciting to see it all come together, to start seeing game code teams jump on it and adjust their system. So it's really great. And for me, I also personally feel it's a very big stepping stone towards server meshing, because this is the tech which actually enables us to separate the simulation from the state, and that will allow us to introduce server nodes, and that will allow us to replicate state between different servers, and that will also allow us to really scale the system, right? So I'm super excited. At the same time, it's also a giant challenge. As I said, it's a ton of new services, ton of new technology. It all needs to be battle tested. We're working hard on that. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm happy that we got the tech together, like the foundational work. We got it in the main line, and now it's just tweaking, stabilizing, and getting it.
Well, you guys, I think that's it. You all know the video. We don't have to.
Yeah, I'm still excited as well. Like
he's excited as well. But
it's been a super big rush to get it in the main line, but now we get all the energy of the entire company behind us. So it's
anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I will have a little summary of everything on a little sheet right here in the video. Very interesting stuff. I know we will have some issues when it comes to our live servers. I know they're gonna test it right now, and we have the first players testing in Evocati very soon, and we're gonna hear a lot about it. I know it's exciting times for CIG, Turbulent, and all the other guys. But yeah, I think now we have a better understanding what's coming, what the risks are, what the opportunities are, and how it will impact our gameplay, and how it will make it better. And hopefully it will make it better. I think so. I'm very confident, actually. There will be a rough road, a bumpy road, so to speak. But yeah, we will see very soon.
As it continues to go. All right, we've still got a minute. I'm gonna ask one more question then.
One more question.
You've got this audience here that'll go up on YouTube. You've got the audience there. What one thing do you want to make sure everybody understands about this work, about PES, about 318, about your role in it, whatever you want? If you could make sure, drive home one last thing that you want to make sure everybody takes away from this, what would it be?
Like for me, it would really be the appreciation and the understanding that while on the surface, especially with 3.18, it might not feel too different of what we have in the previous build, the foundational changes underneath and the structural changes in our core engine, in our core entity system, all like everything you do runs to complete new set of service, complete new set of like the replication layer got completely rewritten. The entity system got completely changed. We separated entity creation and entity spawning. There's a lot of like really cool stuff and like really exciting tech behind powering that. And it's also all made to scale and to like run in the cloud, have stateless services, be able to horizontal scale this thing and like all this stuff, even though in this very first version, it won't feel so much different. Like the code that runs behind the scenes, the little bits and bytes are completely different. And just to get to parity with what we had before is a giant achievement, even though it doesn't feel so different in the very first version.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail perfectly. I think that's the big change, right? Is that we're finally making with this, I think, the game a true cloud service, as it should be, a cloud native service, which is really what we need to make a real persistent universe. And so this is a giant step in that direction, right? In moving the game server and its services together into a true cloud native setup that can really scale to the vision that Chris has for this game, which, even for persistence itself, persisting the entire game world is, it's crazy. Like it's a lot of data. It's millions of entities that need to be stored and retrieved. And so, like Paul said, well, it doesn't look like much has changed. Getting the data in the game server and out of it has completely changed, which is it's a lot of code and a lot of code changes that touch it.